Hello, and welcome back to Talking Planning, this week with another city review. So today I'm going to go and take you over to Perth in Western Australia. So I last went to Perth in March 2019 as a short getaway just before I turned 21, as I wanted to do a bit of a trip away. So I hadn't actually planned to release this video quite yet. I've been having niggles with Adobe Premiere Pro, and I actually wanted to release a video on another city, but that's just going to have to wait for a little while. So this week I don't have a flight review for you. However, I can tell you about my experience because it was pretty cool. So I flew to Perth on board a Virgin Australia A330, and I actually bid for a business class upgrade and I was successful. So it was really nice. I got to enjoy the 5-hour flight, and because I picked my aircraft carefully, I got to enjoy a lie-flat business class, which was a really lovely product, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. So one thing to keep in mind with travelling to Perth is it's a bit more expensive than your typical East Coast services. So this flight was a return base price of $679, and then on top of that, a $310 upgrade for the Brisbane to Perth leg. So overall, the total price was just under $1,000 return, which I think is fairly reasonable given the fact that you can spend that much on a economy flight return. And if I wanted to go in business class return, it would be over $2,000 normally. So enough about the flight. Let's go and check out so you can see what it's like getting around Perth on public transport.
Perth has a sizable bus network, with bus services operated by Transdev, Swan Transit and Path Transit. These three companies cover all suburban Perth services as well as buses in surrounding regions like Mandurah. Overall, I found Perth's buses to be comfortable and clean, with a modern fleet of 100% wheelchair accessible buses. Compared to Sydney or Brisbane, there is limited fleet variety, but there is a mix of rigid and articulated buses to meet passenger demand. Perth's shining transport beacon is their train network. Transperth trains operate 5 rail lines to Butler, Fremantle, Mandurah, Thornlie, Armidale and Midland. Like Queensland, Western Australia uses a narrow gauge train network, and the current Transperth rolling stock was built in Maribor, Queensland. Unlike Queensland, Perth's rail network operates at much higher frequencies, with many lines seeing services of 15-minute frequencies or better, even on the weekend. The A and B sets also bear some resemblance to the suburban multiple units with Queensland Rail, as they were manufactured from the same facility. In addition, Perth also has a small local ferry connecting Elizabeth Quay to Men's Street. There are separate timetables for summer and winter, with ferries operating every 15 minutes in the summer and every 30 minutes in winter. This ferry primarily connects people to Perth Zoo. Rottnest Island also has its own independent bus network, and the island is serviced by several private ferry companies. I travel with Rottnest Express, departing from Fremantle rather than Elizabeth Quay. The Island Explorer buses are operated by Adams Charters. The buses do a loop of the island, connecting between the jetty and many key lookout sites.
So, if unlike me, you like to travel to cities and do things other than go on buses and trains and trams and ferries and stuff, there are a few other reasons that you should consider going over to Perth. So fun fact, Perth is commonly said to be the most remote major city in the world. It's closer to East Timor than it is to Sydney. So the nearest major city, Adelaide, is a 3-hour flight from Perth. So one of the first things I like about Perth is its architecture. So if you like architecture, it's a really nice city to visit, with a range of old and modern building styles to look at. So Elizabeth Quay and the city have some really nice modern structures, including the Bell Tower, which looks a bit like a villain's lair. I really like that building, actually, it's quite cool. Elizabeth Quay also has lots of really modern buildings, and to me it reminds me a little bit of Singapore, which I personally love as a city, and it's quite an interesting place to visit. But if you like older buildings, Fremantle really is a lovely place to visit. A lot of the architecture around Fremantle is from the early to mid-1800s, and there are quite a few buildings that are heritage listed, and in fact Fremantle Prison is actually listed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. There's not a lot of World Heritage Site listed buildings in Australia. There's a few natural parks and stuff, but being a UNESCO Heritage listed building is quite special in Australia. Fremantle is also home to Fremantle markets and it's the main gateway to Rottnest Island if you want to travel there. So Fremantle's about a half-hour train ride from central Perth. Another nice area to explore is an area called Subiaco. So Subiaco is an inner-city, fairly trendy suburb of Perth, and it's got a bit of a live arts and music scene as well, which is quite pleasant. Just be mindful though, Perth can be a little bit sleepy, so if you're like me and you wake up early, going out and about at 8 or 9 a.m, you will be surprised to note how much stuff is actually closed. So if you usually go to a cafe and get a coffee, you might find yourself having to go to a 7-Eleven or a convenience store and get a coffee if you want one early morning. So along with many other coastal Australian cities, Perth has some lovely beaches. From Akimos Beach around Butler in the north through to Mandurah and beaches further south, there's quite a lot to choose from. I didn't really go to too many beaches on this trip, however the two main ones which people visit are Scarborough Beach and Cottesloe Beach. And both do look really nice, certainly from the photos, and well worth a visit if you like the sand between your toes and the surf. But I think one of the big attractions that we do need to talk about is one of my favourites, and that's Rottnest Island. And in the few days I spent there, I did get to go, and it was wonderful. The home of the Quokka, Rottnest is just off the coast of Perth, and it's got a really beautiful outlook and lovely clear water. It's really a stunning place, actually. If you haven't heard of quokkas before, they're a cute, small, little furry animal about the size of a cat, and the quokka is considered a vulnerable species, so there are protections in place. So quokkas are cute and friendly, but please refrain from touching or feeding the quokkas. Though, because one of the big problems is human food and water can hurt quokkas, and it can be quite dangerous to their digestive systems. You can face serious fines or punishments for feeding quokkas, so don't run the risk, just don't do it. The good thing is you can take plenty of photos and cute quokka selfies, so I'd recommend that instead. I've got a couple of beauties to share, so you'll see one up there soon. So, Rottnest Island, going to Fremantle, walking around the city, there's a few nice things to enjoy whilst in Perth, but there are of course many other things that you should try out when you make your own journey over in the future. So as always, I score my cities out of 10, and Perth is a city that I did enjoy spending time in. So I'm going to score Perth 7 out of 10, the same score that I offered Newcastle. Namely, the things that brought Perth's score down are quite high costs of living for things like food and dining out, and a few social challenges. So one thing that is important to note is that Western Australia is based around a mining economy. It goes through boom and bust periods, so there are periods where the economic prosperity is fabulous, and there are periods if the price of resources drops or the demand drops where, you know, the state loses a lot of income. One thing that I've noticed in all of that is that Perth does have a lot of homelessness, unfortunately. It's not uncommon to walk along and see people sleeping rough, people sleeping under roofs and awnings, and sometimes sleeping in the enclosed area like where your ATM is. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Another thing, unfortunately, is drug use. There is a bit of a problem around that. And I think one of the things that made me realise that was walking around at 6 a.m. on the Saturday morning and seeing quite a few drug needles discarded in front of construction sites. And that's never a sight you want to see. Unfortunately, it's an accurate indicator that there are, you know, issues with drugs and alcohol and substance abuse in cities. So unfortunately, it's something that I don't doubt occurs in cities like Sydney and Brisbane, but it is less visible. So it is one indicator that there is a real struggle with that as an issue. On a more trivial note, one thing that is a challenge is the remoteness of WA means that a lot of common goods and services are quite expensive. In Brisbane, we cherish our coffees. They're a little bit more expensive in WA, so don't think that you're going to get out of buying a coffee too lightly. I certainly found that whilst I was in Perth, I was paying $5.50 or even $6 for a coffee that I'd normally pay $4.50 or $5 for in Brisbane. In general, I found that food and drink was about 15 to 20% more than it was on the East Coast. But despite all of these, I really enjoyed my time in Perth, and when it's safe to do so, I'd encourage you to go and visit as well. So it's worth a visit despite a few little flaws. So as always, I'd like to say thank you for joining me on Talking Planning, and I hope to see you again soon with another city review.